Here we go. This evening's question time. And maybe because it's a 2-hour long Q&A session, I think it would always be good to have a 10-minute break in between so people can have a toilet break. Is that okay? Oh, good, yeah. Dear Ajahn, how do we practice active listening and being in the present moment rather than trying to provide solutions and suggestions out of concern or love? Sometimes what I think you mean by active listening is that when somebody is talking to you, you just listen first of all and don't jump to conclusions, don't offer answers yet. A lot of time when people talk to you, remember they're also listening to themselves, and sometimes answers just come to them when they're talking. They just want someone they can trust who can listen to them. But also is the case that sometimes just answers come to the person you're talking to, and they may be able to suggest something. So I always like to say there are no rules in when somebody's talking with you, only to respect them by not, as soon as they're not even half finished a sentence, for somebody butting in and saying something. So out of respect to the other person, see if you can just listen to them with a clear, open mind. And I say with a clear, open mind because there's something which I've noticed in life, that sometimes people have got difficulties and problems and they are unique. In other words, you can't go to some book and say, oh yes, this is the problem, this is the solution, as if it's just like every problem, like a math problem, 2 + 2, that always equals 4. Instead of doing things like that, actually that, okay, a political joke. It's not really that political, but in Australia, they were having the final selections for somebody to stand in a very important seat in an election. And they had 3 last candidates. All 3 candidates were very, very, very smart. And so they asked the first candidate to come in and said, to make our final choice, we're going to ask you a simple question. And the question was, what is 2 + 2? And the guy got his fingers out. He said, 4. He said, very good. Don't ring us, we'll ring you to tell you the results later on. And the next gentleman came in and asked him the same question. You've got to be fair when you're making tests to determine who's the most appropriate candidate. What's 2 + 2? And he got out his iPhone, 2 + 2, and said 4. Very good. Don't ring us, we'll ring you. And get the last man in. And he said, the same question, which asking each one of you, what is 2 + 2? And the man answered immediately, whatever you tell me it is, boss. You've got the job. Anyway, that's an old joke. But anyway, because when you're listening and being in the present moment, also be silent. And then sometimes you can hear things which are way, way deeper than just the words. And you can have some innovative solutions which can often work. I don't mind if I can tell you this story a long time ago, when I was in the BGF, the old BGF. That was the one which was, I forget actually which one it was, but a long time ago. And apparently there was a lady who was having a lot of psychological problems. So, I think Victor or somebody, you asked me just to have a chat with her, find out if you can find any solution. And of course, I was already told that that woman had a lot of meetings with other psychologists and therapists, and nothing had worked. which was why they came to me as like a last resort. The nice thing with going to a monk, there's no fee. So you've got nothing to lose. So anyway, I remember just talking to her and found out what was going on. And straight away, because you told me that she had problems and no one was able to fix it, that I made my mind very silent, very kind, but no ideas of what I was going to say to her. And what she told me was that she had endured a very aggressive, violent rape by somebody. And the poor lady, of course, was really devastated. And when she told me that, I made my mind so still throughout the time I was listening. And then when she stopped speaking, the words which came out of my mouth even surprised me. I said, "You're very fortunate to have been raped like that." And I thought, what am I saying? And it was done by not trying to control or judge what was coming out of my mouth. I just let it come out from a deep place of insight. And then she was as shocked as I was, obviously. No one had ever said that to her before. And then I explained where those words came from. I said to her that somehow I've seen you're a very, very strong woman. You've got resources inside of you which are amazing. You're going to be able to find your way out, from this pain of what happened. But a lot of times when these things happen to people, we feel they've got no meaning behind them. Why does this happen? Why me? And then I said the answer to that question is once you find your way out of this really dark pit, of being a victim, as you have been, once you find your way out, you'll be able to do something which I will never be able to do. You'll be able to talk to another woman who's been abused like you have. You will be able to put your arm around her and say, "I know how you feel." But more than that, you know the way out. And you'll be able to hold her hand and take her gently, slowly, step by step, out of the pain of what you are now experiencing. I said, I think that's your meaning of what happened to you. She was very happy with that response. It was something she never expected, and also something which I never expected, I would say. And as far as I know, it worked for her. A lot of time when you're in big difficulties, you want to find out what's the meaning of this. If there's some way you can grow out of these terrible experiences, there's some way you can get some benefit for you and other beings, then it may be painful, but kind of worth it, if you know what I mean. So that was one example, and there's been many like that, where you put the rule book aside, you listen, you make your mind compassionate and sensitive, and to see what comes out of your mouth. So that's one of the reasons why that when you're listening to somebody, be innovative. Because a lot of people, they go to psychologists and therapists and they get the usual responses. But sometimes as a monk, you can do something different. And if I do make a mistake, it's not that bad because I'm leaving the country next week. Okay, today is day 2 of the retreat. This is last night. And there is so much of restless energy in me today. In the afternoon session, I can't seem to meditate with eyes closed. This is my first physical retreat. What should I do? Help. Please, walking meditation is great though. Again, we'll do more walking meditation, but restlessness. a lot of times that people find it difficult to cope with what they call restlessness because they try to control it. In other words, they think they should be sitting down, watching the breath and getting into jhanas, or at least nimittas, come on. But no, never practice like that. Really, a wandering mind, what you say is a wandering mind, all that is, the problem is that this is what's happening in your mind right now, and you don't want it to be like this. You may be thinking of your work, and you want to be with your meditation or something, with your breath. Maybe even having sexual fantasies. You think, I don't want to do that. You may even be thinking of that Ajahn Brahm, he tells such bad jokes, I've got to sort of come and kill him or something. You may have murderous thoughts. Don't worry, it can't be done because I've got 2 guards in the room next to me. So I'm sure they'll stop anybody going in that room. But anyhow, you may have all these thoughts sometimes and you want to be somewhere else. And that is the pain of a restless mind. Instead, if the mind is restless, is thinking about this, that, and all the other stuff which you can think about, great. If that is what's right in front of your mind right now, make that the object of your meditation. The plan to escape from Sampotong. The plan to sneak out at night, because no one really knows what goes on at night, and you can actually go and get something to eat. I shouldn't say these things, should I? I'm giving you ideas. But instead of feeling guilty, instead of actually trying to say, no, I don't want to do this, it's in your mind right now in this present moment. What's happening right now is the most important thing to be aware of, obviously. So what do you do to it? You care for it. You don't try and abolish it. You don't follow it. You care for it. Something's come up. It's like, it's not yours. It'll pass away. It's teaching you something. This afternoon when I was meditating up in my room, there was a thunderstorm outside. Lots of nice explosions. So what do? Instead of actually saying, I want to be quiet, can I ask the management group, the ones organizing this, can you please stop it thundering and disturbing my meditation? Which is a crazy thing to do. Instead, this is what you're hearing in this moment. Make peace with it, be aware of it, and it goes by itself after a little while. So this is actually means you don't get disturbed, you don't get restless, you're at peace with whatever's happening right now. And that is where one of the meditations, I kind of thought that it'd be nice to teach this tomorrow morning, but I'll give the introduction to it right now, was what you've heard before, the Emperor's 3 questions story. You remember that one? When is the most important time? Who is the most important person? No. The most important person is the one right in front of you right now, whoever that happens to be. Okay, I'm in front of you right now, but I'm not always going to be. And the most important thing to do is to be kind, to care, yes. It was very simple, powerful teaching. And that was not from the Buddha or Eckhart Tolle. That was from Leo Tolstoy. I don't know where he got it from. But when I first saw that as a student, I thought it was brilliant. Especially the most important person in the whole world is the one right in front of you. Which is why when any of you come for the interviews, I really try and make sure like you're the only person in the world, or the most important person at least, so I can really listen and pay full attention no matter who you are. And of course, it was such a powerful little anecdote that I decided to use that for meditation as well. We all know in meditation, and now is the only time you ever have, that the future and the past are just fantasies, both of them. You think, oh, the past, you know what happened, but do you really? Or do you add to it and leave things out of what happened to the past? Because it doesn't really fit what you think should have happened. And it is quite amazing just how people distort the past. But anyway, now is the only time you have. And the most important meditation object in the whole world is what you're aware of right in this moment. Whatever it is, you open the door of your heart to this moment, no matter what it is. So if you're just thinking about so many stupid things, which you got no real reason to think about on this retreat, great. Care for it. Don't try and get rid of it. And then you find restlessness is gone. You can't be restless. Restless is being in some stupid place and wanting to get somewhere else. Instead, this is where you are. Care for it. Be aware of it. It's the most important meditation object in the whole world. Fine. Then you're not restless anymore. Then what happens? That causes your mind to relax and be still. It's the kindness and the awareness you have to what's happening right now, no matter how stupid or painful or irritating it is. You're aware of it, you're being kind to it, and it soon settles down and you become still. You don't try to become still. Trying is wanting to be somewhere else. But when you actually are here and being with something and being kind to it, it settles down very, very easily. One of those other stories about restlessness, one of those incidents which actually changed the way I looked at restlessness, that one morning during the hot season in northeast Thailand, many of the villagers would take their water buffalo out into the fields to graze. And one day, in the early morning, one of the villagers was taking this water buffalo to the fields and using the path which was on the boundary of our monastery, Wat Banana Chat. And I've seen this many times, that those water buffalo, their eyes aren't that good. They sometimes get scared. I know they do get scared of monks because sometimes they look at the monks' brown robes, and I think it must be they just mistake a monk for being like a tiger in the same color. So they get scared. And you know when they get scared because the water buffalo raises their head up. And that's always, I was taught as a young monk, that's a danger signal, be careful, because the water buffalo can then charge. But they didn't see any monks in the monastery, but they must have mistook some sight. And the water buffalo this farmer was taking out to graze spooked, put his head up and started running away. Now, all that water buffalo had was a little string around his neck. And the man who was the farmer was just holding the string, leading the water buffalo gently to the fields. When the water buffalo tried to run away, this man tried to stop him by holding the string. The very stupid thing to do. Who is stronger, a water buffalo or the man, the farmer? Water buffalo is far stronger. So the string wrapped around this poor man's finger, and the water buffalo pulled his finger off, just the top of it. And so because it was right next to the monastery, this farmer came into the monastery with blood coming down his hand and half a finger missing. He wasn't in pain yet because, the shock when an accident like that happens, That actually stops all the pain, but it looked pretty gross. We took him to the hospital and got him fixed up. It wasn't a life-threatening injury. It just meant he had one finger shorter than the rest. But we thanked him. We just made sure he got well looked after in the hospital. We thanked him for the story, the anecdote, the metaphor which he provided. If your mind wants to run off, what is stronger? Your mind or you? If it wants to run off and you try and stop it, it will pull half your finger off. So instead of trying to stop that water buffalo, we all knew, and the farmer knew as well, he just forgot. You just let the water buffalo run off. The water buffalo will go maybe 100 meters or 200 meters away. And then afterwards, you can walk after it slowly. And the water buffalo will be waiting for you. And so you don't need to sort of try to hold it back. Let it run off. And when it gets to wherever it wants to go, then you can hold it by the string and lead it to the correct place. Just like your mind. If you're kind to your mind, it won't run off that far. If you try and stop it, it will. But just let it run off. And then when it goes to where it wants to go, you run after it or walk after it. And then you can lead it to where you need to go. Which means that restlessness does not become a problem for you anymore. When it doesn't become a problem for you anymore, you save so much energy. You don't get so tired trying to train the mind, which doesn't want to be trained. And when you stop trying to train the mind, because you don't waste energy, your energy starts to come up into your mind, natural energy, and you don't experience so much sloth and torpor. I'll say some more about that tomorrow, but there's an opportunity to talk about restlessness and just the ways around restlessness, so you don't have to suffer from that anymore. If a Buddhist practitioner has entered the stream entry path but not yet attained the fruit, is there a possibility for this person to fall away from the path in the future? Thank you, Ajahn. No. If you've on the path to being a stream winner, as the Buddha said, you have to become that stream winner either before you die or at your death. I did mention this to some person a few days ago, that the death event is sometimes very special. Why? It's because at your death, you're seeing so clearly, just you don't own anything. All your possessions you have to let go of. You cannot take them with you. Although there was this one lawyer who thought he'd found a way to take his money with him when he died. He was in the bed, just only a few days to die, nothing else to do but thinking how to, as he called it, beat the system. So he asked his wife, please take those 2 big suitcases, which I have, take them to the bank, and please fill those suitcases up with 100 euro notes. I think 100 euros is the biggest currency people have. Is it? Well, it's big enough. So fill it up with 100 euro notes. I've got plenty of money in the bank. I've been a lawyer all my life. And until they go up, I can grab them on my way to heaven. That was his plan. Quite ingenious. But his wife had it with arguing with him. So she did that, got the money, put it in the room, made sure they were positioned just above his bed. So when he died, he could grab them as he went up. And then, of course, a couple of days later, he died. And after he died, and they did all that stuff for the funerals, she was too caught up with that, not worrying about checking about the suitcases. But when she had a few minutes, she went into the attic and she had a look, and those two suitcases were still there. And she said to herself, the stupid husband, he should have put those two suitcases in the room below his bed. I knew which way he was going. Only a joke. Anyway, what are we doing here? So anyway, if you really have some understanding about what the monks and the nuns have been teaching you for so many years, and what you've been reading and what you've been seeing on YouTube by good teachers, you know you don't own any of these things. And it's wonderful. That's one of the reasons why being a stream winner, even on the path of being a stream winner, you realize how little you own and how all this stuff is just conditioned. So when you realize that, you heard it before, when you do die, it's pretty obvious. You don't own your body. You can't even make the time of your death when it's most convenient for you. And what else do you own? I had, once a long time ago, I had a very good degree from Cambridge University in theoretical physics. If you gave me even just one of those papers today, I would not even get 1% of the questions right. Do I own that knowledge? Or do you own? After a while, you realize you own zero. And it's wonderful the less you own. I've given this simile many times before about my position as a senior monk. If I really wanted to, I can get so stressed out with all the responsibilities I should be doing. When it got to the point once, just being the abbot of Bodhinyana Monastery with lots and lots of monks and a few nuns, and having this big city center, which I was looking after in Nolamara, the Dhammaloka. I know that the chief, Dr. K.C. Dhammananda, was very intrigued that we managed to get our city center in a suburb called Nolamara. Because he looked at that word and said, yeah, great suburb. No, La Mara. You know the word la, don't you? That is like an intensifier. No, La Mara. It's refusing Mara to come in. But anyway, that all those responsibilities which I had at that time meant on the weekend, on a Friday afternoon, I would get into the monastery car and they would take me to the city center to give the Friday evening talk. Sometimes to do a little executive meeting with our committee to make sure everything was going okay. Do the Friday night talk and the Saturday morning arms round and meditation and talking to people, and Saturday evening youth group, Sunday morning at the breakfast, Sunday morning, sometimes the sutta classes in the afternoon. It was a full weekend of work. And then Sunday afternoon, evening, you travel back to Bodhinyana Monastery, and Sunday evening, it was dealing with all the problems which arose in Bodhinyana on the weekend, the monastery, and working there Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, and Friday morning. It was a 7-day working week for me. But what I noticed was that sometimes I'd be with somebody like you, like Victor, Dr. Victor came to see the monastery. And he would say things like, you're so lucky you're living in such a beautiful monastery, got lovely views and lots of nature, beautiful trees, and kangaroos are delightful. And honestly, those kangaroos, when they have their little babies, their joeys, I've been seeing this for 38 years and I'm never tired of seeing these little joeys bouncing around when they first come out. And because we've been there for such a long time, the mothers aren't afraid of the monks, and so neither are the joeys. So sometimes you have to kind of push them out of the way if you want to stay on the path, because they got on the path first, they're not moving. they're, they're totally disrespectful. I kind of like that. But then when somebody would say, what a beautiful monastery you're staying in, so what do you mean? Look at that tree is falling down. It's got to be cut up. Look at that monk who needs to have some special instructions with his meditation. Look at the gutters are leaking. Look at the letter which I have to write to the council about something. There was so much work there. So for me, Bodhinyana Monastery was my work camp, like your office or your business where you work. And I realized there was something terribly wrong there. I was just working too much. And any one of you who visited Bodhinyana Monastery, you could see its beauty, but I, who lived there, could not. So I realized you have to find a solution. And my solution was, on Monday morning, I would pretend to be a visitor, just like you. I wouldn't be the abbot, the boss, the teacher, or whoever on a Monday morning. So I get up and somebody said, oh, Ajahn Brahm, just electricity's fallen off. We need to call somebody. So it's not my problem. I'm only visiting today. One of the monks wants to disrobe. Not my problem. I'm only visiting. And I really did that. And he'd walk through the monastery, and I'm not going to fix anything. I'm not going to change anything. I was just going to enjoy it like you would. When you go to a restaurant for a lunch or a dinner, do you wash the dishes afterwards? Of course you don't. If I go to your house for an invitation to give a talk or something, do I have to sweep and clean it afterwards? No, you do. I'm a visitor. And if you're a visitor, you can see things in a totally different way. You come to this temple. It's beautiful. I'm a visitor, not an owner. But if I owned this place, I would look in a totally different way. You keep ringing up the people, fix the lifts. Look, you have to fix those lifts. If I was an owner, but being a visitor, that's okay, using the stairs. So when you become a visitor, you can have so much more peace and happiness and freedom. If you're an owner, you have responsibilities. And I use that in beautiful ways when I'm meditating. I'm only visiting this body. It's done very well for 71, 72 years. I'm only a visitor. So if you have a sudden heart attack, it's okay. We had a wonderful time together. Thank you, body. I'm not an owner. If I was an owner, I would have far more responsibilities. I'm only a visitor. And then I start doing that when I'm being aware of my mind. Actually, I don't say my mind, the mind. I'm only visiting it. How you going, mind? So I haven't been here for a while, but how you been? So you're a visitor. Because you're a visitor, not an owner, you don't need to control it. You're not a control freak anymore. You enjoy each other's company without judging them. It's great when you meet a good friend. You don't judge the good friend. You know they've got all their sort of idiosyncrasies and failings, but you just want to spend time together and enjoy each other's company. That's like my mind and I, when we meditate. How you going, mind? Yeah, not so bad. What about you? So we don't own anything. We're just being visitors. When you have that idea, a visitor, not an owner, it's much easier to let things go, to let them disappear. I don't know, once I was, actually I wasn't, Ajahn Chakra was away, when we had a huge bushfire in Perth many years ago. And that, came really close to burning the whole place down. It was a crown fire. But that was a good test. When I left, I honestly thought that all the buildings which I had built, myself, I was the main builder, I thought none of them would survive. It was a huge bushfire. It was a good test. What would have happened if the whole Bodhinyana monastery had been destroyed? I remember just afterwards being so happy to see that most of the buildings, all of them actually, were still intact. I remember just going with the chief fire officer from Perth, and I was taking him around one of the buildings, and he looked at it, looked underneath it, looked this way, looked that way. And then he turned to me and said, "Brahm, this should not be here." I always remember him saying that. How come some things survive and some things don't? He said, this should have been incinerated. But anyway, we're happy it didn't get incinerated. But you had the feeling that it was a wonderful thing to do. At that time, I don't know how many years, maybe 10 or 12 years of building that place. And then I honestly, I'm not exaggerating, quite happy to let it all burn down and start again. It's worth doing. But I didn't need to do that. It's a good test. Or like this other gentleman, a good friend of mine, he was like a kind of a Buddhist, but more like a temple hopper. He found like some religious community, and he wasn't strictly Theravada. Some religious community would open itself up in Australia. He would go and stay there for a couple of months. And when he got tired of it, he got on his motorbike. The only expensive thing he had in the world was a very lovely Harley Davidson big motorbike. He didn't have any house. He had hardly any money in the bank. And he just lived off a small pension. And that was the only thing he had was his motorbike. That allowed him to travel from place to place, stay in the temple, help out, volunteer. When he got fed up, then he can go to another place. And he told me that one day he traveled over to Sydney to try and help out in some other temples which were opening up over there. Then he needed to go and get some supplies, some groceries from the shop. So he parked his motorbike in one of these multi-story car parks. And then when he went to get his groceries and he came back, he found his motorbike had been stolen. The only expensive thing he had in the world. And the thing which allowed him to go off and travel, lots of places to go to, visit other monasteries, go to other temples, and some lowlife in Sydney had stolen it. So he was very sad and angry to begin with. But then he thought, no, that's not a good Buddhist attitude. No one ever owns anything. Whoever's got that motorbike, he said, I give it to you. And please get as much enjoyment and pleasure and fulfillment as I've got from this motorbike for so many years. There's been my means of transport. And he said that, and he felt so kind of proud of himself that he'd lost something and he didn't get angry. He just let it go. And he was so proud of himself. And then he noticed he was in the wrong level of the car park. He went to the correct level. And of course, there he saw his motorbike. A good test. But if you're a stream winner, you're entered the path, of course, you don't own anything. And the dying experience is making that so clear to you. You don't own your body. You don't own your gender. You don't own your nationality. You don't own anything. So that allows you to have this wonderful time of letting go, learning how to be a visitor, not an owner. And that might just push you to the last piece. So you really are a stream winner after you pass away. one of the benefits of that is you don't even own your bad deeds of the past. Why you did that, why you responded that way, who knows? But you learn from mistakes. You don't punish yourself from mistakes, which means at the end of your life, if you are a stream winner, you never need to go to any lower realm anymore. You don't need to punish yourself. And no one ever sends you to lower realms to be reborn. You choose to go there. You feel that you do need this as some kind of penance. But once you become a stream winner, enough with penances. You never want to punish yourself for bad deeds. You learn from them so you can grow from them, and you never need to go to any lower realms ever again. Yeah. So anyway, that's for streaming. Oh, it's going to be a long night. I've only answered about 4 questions, and it's been 40 minutes. How to get into sleep before others start snoring. You've been sharing room together, haven't you? Now, this was one of the stories. There was one of the monks over in Bodhinyana Monastery. He said, I've got a brother who wants to come and visit me, I think from Europe. Can he come? And I said, of course he can come, but there's no place to stay. We're full up. He said, I've thought about that. So he said, my way of dealing with that is that he can stay in the same room as me, which is now a small hut. It's only, what is it, 2.4 meters by 3 meters. I know that because I built many of those huts myself. So I said, it's a bit small. Are you okay, sleeping in the same place with your brother? He said, yes, I've got it all figured out. I said, what if he starts snoring? I've got that figured out too. He said, I'll make sure that I lay down first and go to sleep first. Because I know I snore, said this monk, so my snoring will keep my brother awake. Not very kind, but nevertheless, what happened? His brother came, they shared this small kuti together, and his brother fell asleep first and snored. Sometimes you ask people, do you snore? You don't know, do you? You're asleep at the time. Other people know. Do I snore? Because you're in the next room to me. Come on, it's okay. Honest, of course I do. So if you want to have a quiet night, make sure you go to bed and go to sleep first. But anyhow, there he was in a small room and his brother was snoring really loudly. And he thought, oh my goodness, I'm never going to go to sleep. So he started trying to meditate, but the snoring was too loud. And eventually he remembered some little instructions which Ajahn gave. It's not the noise disturbs you, it's you who disturb the noise. So what can that mean? So he started listening to his brother snoring, and he used his powers of perception to start imagining that sound as some new age music, which confounded all traditions. It wasn't melodic. It just made sure it rebelled against all traditional music. Until the point came that his brother's snoring sounded melodic. And that was the last thing which he remembered when he woke up in the morning having had a nice night's sleep. And so if you are in that room and other people are snoring, I don't know, maybe there's 3 other people in the room, 2 other people in the room. How many? Okay, suppose there's 3 others in there. Imagine that that's like a three-part, not orchestra, a trio. And what they're actually chanting there or saying is the most avant-garde music you've ever heard in your life. And then it becomes so beautiful, then you fall asleep. Okay, this is another joke. That was actually true, but this is a joke that somebody said they went to, it was on sort of New Year's Eve. They tried to get a space in a hotel, but every room was booked out. And so the person who was trying to sort of help them said, well, there is one room you can stay in. It's got 2 beds in it, but the person in the next bed snores and no one can stay with him. He snores really loudly. So this gentleman said, it's okay, I can do that, no trouble at all. So I went into this room and this gentleman had a wonderful night's sleep. So when he checked out in the morning, the person at the desk said, you slept well. You're the first person I've known who could ever do that, because this person in the room, he's always snores. How did you do that? He said, very easily. When I actually went into the room, I went into my pajamas, and before I got into bed, I went over to him and kissed him. And he stayed awake all night. Please excuse me. Silly jokes. Don't try that. You get kicked out of the retreat. In the morning, Ajahn asked if we monks had any questions. Actually, when listening to Ajahn, I am using questions as tools. When listening to a story, I ask, what mental quality is Ajahn polishing or fostering with the commenter story? Why did he choose to say this now? I found that these questions open up a whole universe of possibilities. It helps to get a glimpse of the sculpture Ajahn is making. Any comment from Ajahn that can foster investigation would be very welcome. Excellent. You can use questions and answers in so many different ways. Sometimes it's not just answering the main question which has been posed, it's sometimes in how it's being answered. And there also comes a time when people ask questions which you can't really give a good answer to. But anyway, you tried the best. Dear Ajahn, what is the difference between heart and mind? These are just words in English, like you have words in Chinese, words in Malay, which are sometimes not definitive. Monks are not lawyers. We don't use words that accurately. We usually use many words rather than one word. And of course, it depends what that word means in the context which it is written. When I did learn Pali, because that was important as a Buddhist monk to understand what the Buddha actually taught, when I learned Pali, I followed Professor A.K. Warder in his book, Introduction to Pali. And his introduction really meant a lot to me. He said the unit of language is not a word, but is a phrase. So he said you should never translate word by word by word. Only translate phrases. So you don't ever translate the meaning of what heart is, what mind is. What is the context it's in? What is the phrase it's in? And the usual example I use is the old English phrase, it was raining cats and dogs. Now I grew up in England. I've never seen cats and dogs falling out of the sky in a heavy rainstorm. So if you were translating that phrase, you'd say it was raining heavily. Never translate word for word, but translate phrase by phrase. And of course, I've already mentioned this to some of the monks out of the discussions here, even the word like kaya, which you see in many different places, and especially in Anapanasati. Sabakaya pati sangvedi. You breathe in and breathe out. Sabba means all. Kaya, what does it mean? One of its meanings is body. Pati sangvedi, you experience. And sometimes people interpret that that means when you're doing that particular stage of breath meditation, you're actually experiencing your body. And of course, it doesn't mean that. In that particular phrase, it means you see the whole of this accumulation of phenomena, which means your breath. You see it from the very beginning of the in-breath to the end of the in-breath. See the gap between the in-breath and the out-breath, and the whole out-breath as it goes out. The whole of it. The word body in English, sometimes it means a body of troops or a body of evidence. Even kaya in Pali, sometimes you have Dhammakaya. There are so many different meanings. You can't translate things just word by word. You have to translate phrase by phrase. And there you get much more accurate translations. Heart and mind, it really depends on what the other words surrounding it are. Whenever I got lots of thoughts, I control my breath and don't breathe for a while. Then you die. The thoughts eventually slow down. Is it okay to control the breath, but thoughts always come back? Don't be a control freak. If at all possible, just let the thoughts be. But don't own the thoughts. Sometimes it's just like background noise, like music you might hear when you're walking down the street, but it's not yours. So thoughts come, but they're not important. Lessen their importance. Understand you don't own them, and then it's much easier to let them go. And if that's also happens when you're meditating, just understand, just put those thoughts at a distance from you. Don't have them so close to you. And you imagine their distance, so they're just echoes in the distance somewhere. You don't go and try and own them or control them. And then they vanish by themselves. And you don't get tired. You can try stopping the breath if you like, but it's a bit unpleasant. There's much easier ways to do it. If I am not wrong, either tonight or tomorrow night is the new moon. What is your take on meditating during new moon night? It is. New moon is not so powerful, but the full moon, that's really cool. But you can't see the new moon or the full, you can't see the new moon ever, but the full moon, you can't see that in Malaysia a lot of the time because there's so many clouds. Anyway, we're in the hall here, but if you're in a forest, wow, that really is amazing to meditate under the full moon. And sometimes you get lots, I don't know, you get lots of energy. So you're sitting out there in the forest and you don't get tired. You see the full moon out there. You don't need electric lights or flashlights because the full moon gives enough light. You can see where you're going. And that is a beautiful thing to do, to meditate under the full moon at night. Well, there's lovely experiences of full moon. Anyway, okay. When I get back over to Perth, one of the things which I'm supposed to do is this year, or rather next year, 2023, is our 50th anniversary of the Buddhist Society of Western Australia. And people want to organize a special event. One of the reasons they want to do that is that 20 years earlier, we had our 30th anniversary. And that was an amazing event. And I say that just with restraint. Because you can ask someone like an Ajahn Brahmali. He is just, whenever I start mentioning weird stuff like psychic events and stuff, supernatural events, he was, oh, come on. But this is one of those events and he admits, yeah, this was weird. Because the Wesak day in, what are we, 1980s, 1993? Yeah, it must be 2003 or whatever, I forget which now. The Wesak was going to happen on a Sunday, full moon night in May. And so we said, well, let's try and do something big. We managed to find that Supreme Court Gardens, right in the middle of Perth, was free that evening. We could hire it. So we hired it. We managed to get a big new Buddha statue from Thailand, huge one, gold plated. And we were going to move that into the center of Supreme Court Gardens and have a circumambulation in the evening time starting at 7. Because I was the boss at the time, Ajahn Chakra had left, that I was in charge and I said, money is no object. Let's do a very good show. So we got all the tents and all of the equipment on this outdoor event. We even invited the senior politician of Perth. Now they have states, and so he was a premier of that state. His name was Jeff Gallup. And Jeff Gallup was also the best man, a very close friend of Tony Blair. As you know, Tony Blair was a very close friend of President Bush. And this was my big plan. Once you get Jeff Gallup on side, then he can get Tony Blair on side, and then we'll be able to make peace in the whole world. Came close, because we invited Jeff Gallup, and he said, yes, he will come for our big celebration. Problem was, that evening, that morning, when I woke up in Bodhinyana Monastery, it was raining. This was an outdoor activity. You check the weather forecast. There was a major weather event coming to Perth, which was going to hit the center of Perth at 7 p.m. when we were going to start. A major weather event, not just a little like this afternoon, but a big storm. And so all day it was raining. And the rain was getting heavier and heavier and heavier. And as we were trying to set things up in this Supreme Court Gardens, 3 times the Premier's office, he never rang up, one of his secretaries rang up, are you cancelling? 3 times I replied by phone, no. One of our members, who was a merchant seaman, he took me and he dragged me aside and said, Ajahn Brahm, you're embarrassing us. I know what I'm talking about. I've been at sea all my life. I looked at the barometer. The pressure is going down. It is going to be a heavy storm coming. You have to cancel. I said, no. Then one of my monks grabbed me by the shoulder and took me aside and said, Ajahn Brahm, please, we can't do this. You have to cancel. No. And it was raining really heavily. The big event was going to happen. And I just happened to be in a VIP tent, just setting up some tables. And one of our members, she was elderly, she was Burmese. She was crying. She came in. And I thought, oh no, what's happened now? What else can go wrong? That was what I felt. Come outside now. And I thought someone must have electrocuted themselves or something. But when I went outside, the rain had stopped and she pointed up to the sky. She couldn't speak. Said, look, you saw the full moon in the sky. The clouds had parted. We did the whole ceremony. The premier came and it was like miraculous. The following morning, Supreme Court Gardens, where we did that event, was under 2 inches of water. The freeway closed because it was flooded. It was a major storm. But when we held our event, no rain. And so the Premier, Jeff Gallup, was very impressed. He is now the patron of Jhana Grove Retreat Center, where you're going to go in September, October, whenever it is. He's still the patron. And I remember just one of the organizers showed me an email from the head of the company which hired all the electricity, the lights and the tents and the chairs and the tables and the stage. And the head of that company said, we've never heard of this Ajahn Brahm before, but please ask him who's going to win the horse racing today. I took that as a compliment. It was one of those events which, wow, it even kind of shocked me just how well, if you're doing something which is really inspiring, how there are other forces which are way beyond you do help you out. That was amazing. So that was a full moon night. It wouldn't happen another time. So cool. Okay, I did promise that we'll have a toilet break after 1 hour. So I haven't even finished yesterday's question. But don't worry, I'm sure you're enjoying it. So let's have a toilet break for 10 minutes and then we'll go on to the next questions. Crikey. Okay, most people are back. So if the people are a little bit late, they can always catch up on the question on the recording. Unless we can manage to get a live feed to the toilets. Dear Giga Terror, that's a good start to this question, because I often thought that for a monk, if you have 10 years as a monk, you're called Terra, Thera, like an elder. 20 years, you're called Mahatera. But then there's nothing afterwards. I thought that's really unfair. So I thought after 30 years as a monk, you can be Mega Terra. And after 40 years, Giga Terra. And now you know why I laugh so much. I'm Giggle Terra. Can you elaborate on the drawbacks of sensual pleasure? I attended recent retreats by Bhante Akaliko, and I think Bhante Akaliko draws his inspiration from Pautaliya Sutta, if my memory serves me right. I wonder if Ajahn can offer different perspectives on this topic. For me, spiritual joy is harder to access than sensual pleasures, which seems more readily available. Thank you very much. The sensual pleasures can seem more readily available, but they're much more uncertain than the spiritual pleasures. The simile which came up was the simile of the two trees. One tree grew up in the mountains and one sprouted in the plains. And one which sprouted in the plains because there's more water down in the plains and it was softer soil, grew very quickly. And the one which grew up in the mountains had to put its little roots in the cracks between the rocks. It took much longer to grow. But then when the storm came, the trees in the plains, they fell over very quickly. The ones whose roots were bonded to the rocks, they lasted much longer. So the spiritual pleasures, they are much more stable and last much longer. The sensory pleasures, I think as you all know, you're not young people anymore. Well, you are, some of you are youngish, but you've had enough experience of the world. Sometimes it's very unreliable, the sensory pleasures. And so because of that, there's also the spiritual pleasures are far more delightful. Of course, I'm being honest with you. Of course, I'm a monk. You may think I'm biased, but it was good as a monk. I became a monk when I was 23 years of age. By that time, I did have a lot of experience in the world, traveling, and also girlfriends. And this was one of the reasons I say that I was into sensory pleasures until the time came when I went on a retreat. I got into a deep meditation. I mean, that deep meditation, it was just honestly, it blew my mind that the pleasures of meditation were far more delicious, stable, lasted longer, please excuse me, than sexual orgasm. And I had a choice between the two. And of course, there was no contest there at all. That's where, my girlfriend lost me. Deep meditation was far more beautiful. And yeah, it was more difficult to attain, but it was less problematical. A lot of sensory pleasures depend upon something else. It's not just you. It's, a girlfriend, a boyfriend, just a device which you can watch. And you notice the spiritual pleasures are more individual, which was one of the reasons it's a little bit more trustworthy. The sensory pleasures I had as a young man, depending on getting a ticket to see my favorite band, having a girlfriend who was compliant, But all those types of sensory pleasures, because they depended on something else, it was difficult. And when you could just sit anywhere in your room or in a meditation retreat center or anywhere under a tree and just close your eyes and get bliss, which is much better than listening to any rock band or any sort of girlfriend. And that was just amazing. It's harder to get the spiritual pleasures, but it's worth it. Because once you have that, it's much more stable. And has all these other benefits too. Some of the wisdom which you get. Basically, it's no contest. Once you experience some of the bliss states. Okay, next question. Where, what, when is the first human, animal, and the first planet come from? When I was a kid, I always thought, where is the end of the world? Because I was brought up in UK, every map I saw had UK in the center and every other country was off on the edge. Poor old Australia wasn't even on the edge. It was down the bottom in the corner, like it'd been some bad country in the past. But I kind of liked it when one day I saw the correct map of the world. And Australia was in the middle. England was down the bottom somewhere, and America was out to the right. But where is the end of the world? Of course, there is no end of the world. The Roman government thought they were the Middle Earth. Do you know what Middle Earth is pronounced in Latin? Mediterranean. Chinese culture say they were the Middle Earth. Everyone thinks they're the center of things. But when you look at this planet Earth, it has a limited area. Surface area is limited, but it's got no edges. And that's where you started to look at the universe. I'm sure you all know this from the science which you've studied or the science you've seen on the TV or whatever. This universe has got a limited volume. Space is limited. It's not endless. It's not infinite, according to astrophysics. But it's got no edge. If you go fast enough and far enough, you don't get to the edge of the universe where there's a big razor wire fence and say, can't go further, end of universe, you get prosecuted. Because this universe is curved. Just like planet Earth is curved. So it's limited space, but no edges to it. The universe is curved. Limited volume, but no boundary. Why can't we have time the same? The whole idea of a beginning of time and an end of time never made any sense to me as a scientist. So why can't time be curved? No beginning, no end. No first, no last. To me, that's beautiful. And it solves so many philosophical problems. I didn't invent that. Other philosophers and scientists got there way before me. Ajahn, I have the habit to wake up around 3:30 a.m. every day. Excellent. Sometimes I feel tired and drowsy during meditation, but sometimes not. Should I force myself to sleep more and break the habit? No. It's wonderful, because if you get up really early in the morning, it's like you own that time. No one else is up. It becomes a beautiful time of the day. Just yours. Everyone else is fast asleep and missing out. If you feel tired, you can always go to bed earlier, or you can have a nap after lunch, especially on retreat. Because after lunch, if you especially have a big lunch, then all the blood goes to your tummy. You do feel tired anyway. So just working with if you like to get up at 3:30, brilliant. How can we use meditation to heal the pain in our soul? Thank you, Ajahn Brahm. Easy. If you've had some very terrible event in your life, if you've, say, been traumatized, really badly traumatized, how can you actually heal that? And I think I say this on maybe every trip which I go to, whether it's here or to UK or to Norway, that you all know the story which I've taught about opening the door of your heart. It's the expression of what real compassion, kindness is, no matter what happened. And many people have listened to these talks and ideas, but I'm very impressed how people have taken those ideas and moved them even forward so they become more powerful. So some years ago, I was invited to a little group, happened to be in Perth, and they called themselves Assets, ASSETTS. And it was an acronym meaning Australian Society for the Survivors of Torture and Trauma. Because countries like Australia, we try, to allow refugees, from some of the countries which are so violent, allow some of those refugees to come into Australia and to be looked after. And physically, the Australian government did a wonderful job making sure they got a place to stay, education, learning English, and getting a job, enough food. But the one thing which the government could not do was to solve the trauma of the past. And some of these women and men have been held in these underground dungeons and treated so cruelly, so barbarically. And if you heard some of the stories which some of these women and young boys said happened to them, it just made your skin creep. What some human beings to another is just unbelievable. But they're here, in this case in Australia. What can you do for them? Physically, they're free. But sometimes in the middle of the night or something makes them feel like they're back in those torture chambers, being raped and being beaten by people they don't really know. How can they get some freedom? And so this little group invited me there because they wanted to show me what they were doing. They'd borrowed this simile of the opening the door of your heart and used it in such an amazing way and very successfully. In brief, when any one of these victims of torture and trauma came to them, first of all, they had to feel safe. So they had to have confidence building with the people who were supporting them. And once they felt safe enough, they would sit usually in a chair, invited to close their eyes, do a very quick meditation just to settle themselves down. And then imagine, visualize in their chest, above their heart, these double doors. And imagine opening up the doors in front of their heart and imagining the person they were at peace with, the person who wasn't being tortured, inside their heart. But that was not all of them. They look outside on the ground, on the cold, wet concrete, and they'd see those little girls that they were so many years ago, being just so badly abused, multiple rapes, beatings. They see all those parts of them as children, as young women, young men, outside. And then they would imagine the stairs coming down, like in the old aircraft, stairs coming down from their heart to the ground. And when they were ready, they'd invite all those little beings who were them many years ago. Please come up. Come into my heart. I'm not going to keep you outside again. Come in. And it's a very traumatic meeting with people they found it so hard to be with because they hurt so much. And they come up, and when they get to the top of that staircase, a big embrace. I will never deny you ever again. You're who I am. You're part of me. Welcome. They open the door of their heart to themselves. All of them. And apparently it works really well. Because if you have been a lot of pain in the past, you just want to try and find a way that you can live without that pain. You can sort of blot it out, like press a delete button so you never have to think about it ever again. That's not the way. Invite it in. Embrace it. It's who you are. With kindness and care, the pain vanishes. And seeing some of these people, I always tell the story because at the end of a talk on a Friday night, one of these ladies who had been tortured and raped and all sorts of terrible things. And she was describing that to one of the young men. And he was hearing it with disgust. What the hell to do? That's disgusting. That's terrible. And then she said to him, and I overheard this, you've got no right to say this was a terrible thing. This is who I am. This is me. And the way she said that, she didn't feel that pain anymore. She had conquered that. But she would never deny that ever again. She was strong. She's one of the most powerful women I've ever met. She said, this is who I am. I'm free of it now. Now I'm not trying to deny it anymore. And that was something which I never expected. I could never imagine opening the door of your heart like that. When everything comes in, you don't force it out. And it worked. I was so honored they could show me just how well it was working. So that's real pain. And it works. Ajahn, how can I practice forgiveness? Intellectually, I know I need to forgive a particular person, but in my mind and heart, it's not happening. I find myself ruminating over the wrongs and hurt the person has done. Is there a way to practice forgiveness on the mat and off the mat? Please advise. First of all, forgive them at a distance. In other words, you're on the mat here, and they're in another place, another city, but you can still forgive them here. And every time you practice forgiveness here, what does it do to you? It's like, you're free of a big problem. As one person said, you're not the victim anymore. You're the victor when you forgive somebody. And it's also to help. There's all these amazing examples of forgiveness. I gave one of those examples over in the interview room earlier today. One of the other examples was this woman. She was, I think, German or Austrian born. She was one of two twin girls, and both of them were taken into Auschwitz. Her sister was the one which was subject to all these terrible, painful, inhuman sort of trials by Dr. Mengele. And there was this terrible what was done. She, this other sister who survived, she was like in any experiment, you do something on one of the twins and the other one is like the control. Is that the right word, is this? Yeah. the one they can compare what happens. But she suffered immensely too. You're a young girl, you put in this camp, and these doctors are supposed to care for you, basically torturing her sister. And she felt so much pain as well. She remembered those doctors, so-called doctors. Later on in her life, she found one of those doctors in, I think it was Argentina. And she told him, so I know who you are. I was one of the people you experimented on, and my sister. Meet me in current day Auschwitz. And this doctor, this elderly man, was so ashamed, embarrassed. He went to Auschwitz and met her there. And when she met this doctor, who was one of the people responsible for torturing and killing her sister and giving her such a hard time, she forgave him. And really, the doctor was just so confused, saying, I forgive you for what you did to me and my sister so many decades ago. She said, when you forgive, again, you're not the victim anymore. Now here in the place it all happened, I am the victor. When people do these amazing acts of forgiveness, which sometimes you think that person doesn't deserve, it's really inspiring, because it tells whoever wrote this question, it tells you and everybody else here, there's nothing which you cannot forgive. There's nothing that bad you think, oh no, I can't forgive that. I remember, I think I was here in Subang Jaya Temple after 9/11, teaching a retreat. And somebody asked me, said, if you were President Bush after 9/11, what would you do? And I said, honestly, I would go on TV and I would say, I forgive Osama bin Laden, any terrorist who was involved in that attack. There's been too much blame, revenge, violence. Let's put an end to it. A couple of thousand Americans died. Let that be the end of people dying. Let us give forgiveness to the Taliban, to Osama bin Laden, to everybody. I remember just people standing up and giving me a standing ovation and telling, Ajahn, why don't you become President of the United States? I kind of remember that. But imagine what would have happened if someone had actually, maybe political suicide for him, but had actually not taken the violent path, the forgiveness path. And I kind of imagine that night when I went to bed, I almost had a dream of all the people in the Muslim world going up with pictures of George Bush. Long live George Bush, long live George Bush, instead of Osama bin Laden. It's inspiring when people forgive. You say it might not work, it's illogical, but Dhamma is sometimes illogical. It just goes in a far deeper direction. Have you been really perfect in your life? All the things which you've done, which you shouldn't have done? Wouldn't you like it if those people forgave you and said, I don't agree with what you've done, but you're forgiven, and you really mean that? Forgiveness is one of the most powerful things which a person can do. You go way beyond the normal human response to something which makes a far better world. But there was this one couple on forgiveness, They were been coming to Bodhinyana Monastery to give food once a week, and they wanted to talk to me after the meal. So yeah, what's the problem? And she was not looking at her husband, and she was very embarrassed. She said that he was taking his jacket to be cleaned at the dry cleaners, and she saw there was a receipt in his pocket, and the receipt was from what they call a brothel. He'd been gone to visit prostitutes, and she confronted him. He said, "Oh yeah, I'm sorry." And so, if you have a partner like that, and they're having sex outside the marriage with prostitutes, that really is a very serious lack of trust. And so she said, "I've got to divorce him." And he was saying, "But I still love her." "How can you love me when you do stuff like that?" Had this big argument in front of me, in front of the big Buddha statue with all the relics and everything. And then I used my influence on her. Said, "Look, you've been coming to this temple a long time. I am a powerful monk, I'm a good monk. Please forgive him." He said, "I can't." "Why should I?" I looked at him and I said, "Can you please promise in front of me, in front of the Buddha with all the Buddha relics there, you will never ever do that again?" And he was actually crying. He said, "I will never do that again. I promise, honestly." His sincerity was questioned again and again and again. So then he went to the next level of forgiveness. I said to his wife, "Can you please give him probation?" Probation, I said, means for 12 months, that your husband has to give you full access to his iPhone codes. And he agreed. So for 12 months, they lived together, but not close. He was on probation. And honestly, I think it was only 6 months. And after 6 months, he kept a very clean record. And she realized he did actually love her. And they're back together. And the last few years, maybe 5 or 6 years, they come to offer food to the monks every week, always together. He asked for forgiveness. She gave him forgiveness with probation. You have to make sure you do this for 6 months. And then he did that. It worked. It's wonderful to see them together. He made a very, very bad mistake. Can't excuse the mistake, but you can forgive it. And he valued that so much, he will never, ever hurt his wife ever again. We get delicious food once a week. Honestly, you have a choice there. See if you can forgive. It's far, far better than carrying that pain for year after year after year. Everyone makes mistakes. See if you can understand that and let it go. Next question, is the 7th chakra related to meditation? Not really. I saw indigo color kind of light flares up and some image seen behind it. I was so excited and tried to explore further, but it disappeared after a while. And most of the time it's because excitement. The very beautiful images called nimittas only occur when you're peaceful and still. And every time you try and own them, capture them, investigate them, it gets worse. You disturb the mind. Remember what I said about the still forest pool? Every time you get excited, the animals see they run away. How will breaking precepts affect one's meditation and life in short term and long term? If you break precepts and it's a mistake, and you acknowledge that mistake, you try to do better next time, that is growth in the practice of meditation, said the Buddha. The Buddha never expected everybody to take the 5 precepts and keep them perfectly ever after. You know you will make mistakes. And if you do make mistakes, let somebody else know. Confess. Acknowledge. And learn from the mistakes so you'll be a better person afterwards. I remember this one guy. I went to visit him in hospital because he was having a heart bypass surgery many years ago. He was English Buddhist, and his wife was also a Buddhist as well. They settled down in Perth. He was in the Royal Navy before. But anyway, once they settled down there, I went to see him in one of these wards with 4 other patients, 3 other patients. He was number 4th. And then he was due to have his heart operation in a couple of days' time. And the following morning, his wife called me. Ajahn Brahm, I need to speak to you. So what happened? He said, this morning, I lied to my husband for the first time since we've been married. We've always made honesty such an important thing. We've been married about 30 or 40 years. Now I've lied to him. So what happened? Well, I went to see him this morning in hospital. He's going to have the heart operation tomorrow. And he asked me, how was Tom, the person in the next bed who had his heart operation the night before, or the afternoon before? And I said, oh, he's fine. He's in the ICU recovering. What I've really happened, I saw his family in the hospital as I came in, crying, because Tom had died under the bypass surgery. I couldn't bring myself to tell the truth to my husband that the operation he was going to have later on this afternoon, that same operation killed the man in the next bed. I lied to him. And I said, okay, I think that's not bad that you lied to your husband about that, because it was out of concern for him. And indeed, he was struggling to survive after his heart bypass operation. He pulled through eventually. But I often think that if she'd have told him the truth, he may have died. And so I say that I will forgive you if you lie to your husband, but not more than once every 30 years. Okay. Dear Ajahn, during some retreats, Milo that contains milk, like the Milo 3-in-1 and cheese, are not allowed to be taken after lunch by the 8 preceptors as allowables. Some organizers even said that anything that contains milk is not allowed. Could Ajahn please clarify? Honestly, don't be so strict. Some people say milk is allowed, some people say it isn't. Some people say soy milk is allowed, some people say it isn't. Quite frankly, my standard is if it's really needed, fine, just take it. It's a small thing. I don't take it because I don't need it, but sometimes if I'm really hungry, if I missed a lunch or something, sometimes you take some cheese. Cheese has got milk in it, hasn't it? How come cheese is allowed but milk isn't? And this, in my life as a monk, again, 48 years as a monk, I spent not hours, days arguing about this. And that's just too much thinking, too much argument. Keep it simple. Over here, I'm not quite sure what's allowed, but I don't check what the lay people drink or eat here. I just have tea. So if you need it, I would say take it. If you don't need it, don't. But don't have a meal. Don't say, oh, milk is allowed. Or milk, what's the difference between milk and rice and curry? So keep it nice and simple. But just check with the organizers because you don't want to cause them trouble. When I was doing walking meditation, my mind kept worrying kept thinking about the past relationships, work performance, and how my action leads to its downfall. For example, failed relationships, stagnant growth at work. It kept telling me that I'm not good enough, that I fail in life. It also kept telling me that I'm still the same person, i.e. character behavior. How do I overcome this annoying thoughts about myself and focus on meditation in the present moment? First of all, so many people think they're not good enough. Sometimes even they've got a name for it now in psychology, imposter syndrome. And one of the people who became quite well known suffering from imposter syndrome was Michelle Obama. She thought that she was no good as a first lady. And my goodness, everything I ever saw of her, read about her, everything she did, she was an amazing first lady. And she really lived up to that role. So I don't know why she thought that she was not really up to it. But then I thought, no, this is what happens when people accept criticism and they don't know how to accept praise. If I praised you, Victor, all those years that you were looking after the BGF, and now see where it is. A wonderful achievement, Victor. Will you accept that? Or you say, oh no, it's just other people. Anyone would do that. If you don't know how to accept praise, you too will look at your life and think you're no good, you're a failure. Some years ago, again, I got awarded this John Curtin Medal. It's quite a prestigious thing in Western Australia. John Curtin was a past Prime Minister of Australia, and John Curtin is a university named in his honour. So I went to the ceremony where they gave me this medal and I had to give a speech. And my speech was, thank you very much for giving me this medal. I don't know why you gave me this medal, but nevertheless, thank you. There's more people in the community who do much better work than I do. And I couldn't have been able to do this without the help of all my friends, but thanks anyway. That was basically my speech. And the next year, it was given, this medal, when I went to the award ceremony next year, was given to this doctor who was the head hematologist at one of the big hospitals in Perth. He decided to do something different. He used his authority to kick a few people out of rooms in that hospital and turn it over to an alternative therapy center where you could get homeopathy, Reiki, foot massage, anything weird, he said, was allowed there for free for any patient who was going into that hospital for treatment for cancer. So after visiting the radiologist, after getting the chemotherapy adjusted, you could go there and just lay down and get a free foot massage. And he said what it meant was that these patients were being cared for by this alternative therapy. He didn't know if it worked or not, but he did know if you're having a foot massage, one person is looking after you and spending half an hour with you, just pressing this and pressing that. And he said he did that because he knew that healing cancers were not just about getting the chemotherapy or radiation therapy or surgery right. It was about people caring for you. When I heard that, I was so inspired. I thought, wow, now that guy really deserves that John Curtin medal. And he went up to give his speech and he said, I don't know why you're giving it to me. There's so many other people in the community do much better work than I do. And I couldn't have done this anyway without other people helping me. And I said, that's my talk. But I realized from that experience that why didn't I go up there in the previous year and say that there's some really intelligent people who had done their research and thought I deserved my prize? Why didn't I just go up there and say, thank you, yes, I deserve that? Why didn't this Professor Jofi go up there and say, yes, thank you, I deserve that too? Why can't, when I praise Datuk Victor Wee, why can't I say, very good job you've been doing with the Buddhist Fellowship? Why can't you say, yes, Ajahn Brahm, I deserve that? Come on. No, that's what. I'm saying pass it on to other people. No, it's nice that you, and once you start to accept praise, you actually start to feel that, you don't deserve to feel yourself as a failure. You've done a lot. That's one of the reasons why I love, wherever I can, honestly, praising people. Saying thank you. Look, honestly, the food you've given me on this retreat so far, I'm really impressed. You've done some research and found out, what I can eat, what I like to eat. Thank you. And same with the other monks, find out what they can eat, what they can't eat. And it's a beautiful thing that you're looking after people. So that gives a lot of happiness to my tummy and to other people's tummies as well. Well done. Okay, I better do some more questions, otherwise I'm not good enough, am I? Just keep on telling jokes instead of answering questions. What should be the correct speed pace of walking meditation? 20 kilometers an hour. And you'll be fine. We'll get a speed camera in case you're too fast. No, the correct answer is keep it natural. However fast or slow is comfortable for you. How to let go ego and contemplate non-self. Sadhu, sadhu, sadhu. How to let go and contemplate non-self. Again, I was going to bring this up when we start talking about insight, but you've asked the question, so I should answer it. Like when you get into these deep meditations, I'm talking about the jhanas, it's like the simile of the tadpole and the frog. Sometimes you could look through the sutras, you get some amazing similes, but sometimes you can add to those similes by inventing some new ones. And this is one of the best. A tadpole, born in the water, grew up in the water, went to school in the water, went to university in the water. She was a very bright tadpole. At university, inside the water, she studied hydrology. And she soon graduated and became a professor in water. And because that was in the Buddhist water. But how could a tadpole know what water is? She was born in the water, lived all her life in the water. She knew as much about water as a fish knows about water. She knew all the theories, but how can a tadpole really know what water is? But then one day, little tadpole grew legs and arms. She was transforming into a frog. And one day, little tadpole, now a little frog, not really knowing what she was doing, jumped out of the lake onto dry land. And that was one of the weirdest experiences she ever had. Because on dry land, something was missing. Something which had always been there, which is why she couldn't really understand what it was. But once it disappeared, that's what water is. Jumping up on dry land is like getting into these deep meditations, totally different than anything you've ever experienced before. Scary sometimes, exciting sometimes, but you put aside excitement and fear and you're sitting on a place where most of what you take to be yourself has disappeared. It's not there anymore. Little things like your will, choice. In something like the second jhana, that's totally absent. It's not as if right now you may have a will, but you don't decide to use it. Here it's just not there. You have no choice at all. It's gone, but you're perfectly aware and very blissed out. Now you have an understanding of what will is. This is actually where you start to dismantle your illusions of a self. I can talk about will, free will, choice, conditioned will. Just makes you a bit confused. We have an experience of a deep meditation where will is totally gone. Now you have an opportunity to understand it. That is where the meditation leads to the possibility of you seeing no self. Have I bamboozled you on that simile? Bamboozled means totally confused you. If I have, don't worry, because I'm sure I'll tell that simile again. It's one of my favorite ones. It's one more question and then be the last question, even though there's many more to come. It's answering your question is important, but more important than that is actually teaching the Dhamma. So anyway, hi Ajahn, I have heard about others' experience on unable to achieve stillness in meditation. My personal experience was mainly seeing episodes of event playing in my mind, like in a dream state. I couldn't recall exactly what were played. I believe they are mainly neutral events, not particularly angry nor sad. How do I avoid trapping in these dream states? I usually wake up when my posture becomes unstable, moving front. Thank you, Ajahn. You just keep on doing meditation, and after a while, your energy starts to increase. You have how many days is this retreat? 7 or 8 days? 8. Well, sort of, anyway. 9 days, okay. 9 days. Over those 9 days, because you are restraining your mind, you're not watching movies, I hope. You may be looking at your emails, but try and limit them. And as you restrain your mind more and more, you don't go talking to your friends. Try and live a life of kind of solitude. And if you can do that, your mental energies will increase more and more and more. When your mental energies will increase, so will your stillness. Yeah, you have difficulties, with not being totally still or totally peaceful. But over the days, the mindfulness and the stillness will increase. Sometimes you don't realize how much they increase because it's just like As a monk, I have a beard. If I don't shave it, then it'll go longer and longer and longer. But I can't feel it growing. But it just grows day and night. Same with your peace, with your mindfulness. It does actually grow greater and greater every day. You may not notice that, but other people do. Like when you leave this place, often I used to tell people when they went onto a meditation retreat, if you drove in your car coming to a meditation retreat, when you get into your car to go home, don't go home directly. Do a couple of laps of the car park. So you actually get sort of back to the ability to drive a car again. And I said that because on one retreat which somebody went to, they went out of the car park and they had a minor crash in the car. They were just so peaceful as they were coming out. Which is nice that happens, but if you're going to be driving in traffic, you have to be a little bit more tense, I suppose you'd say. But anyway, you don't realize how much you've been progressing. So it does get easier as the days go past. And sometimes people they get blown away that they think they're getting nowhere. And then they sit down here and just, wow, have a really nice deep meditation. Or they're walking meditation, they get very peaceful. Don't think you're an imposter, a bad meditator. You all have incredible abilities. Make use of them. It works. One thing which I can say is that I've been teaching for so many years, decades, and you see some people, the people I thought were least possible of getting into deep meditation, and they get it. One of those people, just final story, when this man came to check in to one of my retreats at Jhana Grove, he was Australian, he had curly hair, and he was wearing traditional Australian national dress. A t-shirt, shorts, and a pair of thongs. That's called in Australia traditional Australian national dress. And because he wasn't wearing that much, it was summertime, he was full of tattoos all over the place. And he was not the sort of person I was used to coming on a retreat. I hadn't seen him before. I put my hand up, I judged him. I shouldn't do this. And I looked at him and I said, are you in the correct place? Because 6 kilometers up the road from Jhana Grove Retreat Center, there's Carnet Prison Farm. Are you trying to meet one of your friends at Carnet Prison Farm? That's what he looked like. He said, no, I booked into your retreat. And I found his name on there. Yeah, okay, sorry. Yeah, you're on the retreat. I apologize for judging you. And then during that retreat, after 4 or 5 days, when he came for one of his interviews, he told me about his meditation. Oh my goodness. He got into a jhana, no doubt at all, a beautiful meditation state. And he was the last person on 60 people on that retreat I would ever have thought would get into a jhana. He did it. It taught me a lesson. I cannot judge which one of you will get into these beautiful states. You've all got that potential. And if you haven't had a jhana yet, please get some tattoos. So anyway, that's my experience. I cannot say which one of you get deep meditation, but you all get it in the end. So anyway, that's enough for this evening. Sadhu, sadhu, sadhu. And please have a nice quiet night. And remember, if you just find it difficult because other people snore in your room,